Hi, and welcome to another episode of Entrepreneurship Uncovered, where we discuss the beauty and challenges of entrepreneurship. I'm Gabrielle Luma, CPA, CGMA, and CEO of Mod Ventures, and today I'm excited to have Kim Madrigal from Madrigal Coaching and Consulting. Before we start, let me tell you a little bit about Mod Ventures. Mod Ventures is an outsourced accounting and advisory company for businesses across the United States. We offer operational accounting to small businesses struggling to understand their finances. Our passion is to help entrepreneurs create their financial futures and the business of their dreams. So welcome, Kim. I am so excited to have you today. I know that this is going to be such a great conversation. We've already started talking, and I'm like, wait, save that for the video. So, Kim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Gabby. This is exciting.
Kim and I just got started talking, and she had created this business story of magical coaching and consulting. And I thought, man, this would be perfect for her to showcase during this video and kind of talk about her journey of not only becoming the founder of Magical Coaching and Consulting, but also talking about um, like who she serves and why she does what she does. And so I'm so excited that we can showcase this new learning tool that you just started implementing in your company.
Thanks, Gabby. I'm excited.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and jump in and tell us just a little bit about yourself and why you do what you do?
I'm Kim Madrigal, the founder of Madrigal Coaching and Consulting. And what we really focus on is building strategy for sustainability and agile ecosystems. And so I'm going to take you through the story as we've been developing the story as we're in a journey of new entrepreneurship. And and then and Gabby, you prompt me where you want to prompt me and lead me down the path. The intention of this really storyboarding this is that I had not really thought through my own journey and how I'd gotten where I am and what I really stand for or mean. And so this is the beginning of my storyboard and really telling that story, even after years of providing these services.
Yeah.
This is my intentional attempt of really storyboarding it and sharing my story.
Well, yeah, and to back up just a little bit further, I mean, this is really not your first rodeo. Um, you've been doing this type of work for a really long time, but just launched your business literally a year ago, maybe a little longer, but pretty close to that. So, prior to this endeavor, what were you doing before?
I was a nonprofit leader for almost 29 years and an educator. So I was in higher education for a long time too, kind of co-working in that. But I grew up in nonprofit and by accident landed in the Boys and Girls Club movement, as we would say, and grew up as a leader within the movement, working eventually for our national office, leading training and consultation, and then um, and then eventually leading the operations of a large organization and then knowing that it was time to go out on my own. And partly because I was doing both of these things at the same time, I was able to kind of consult and coach in organizations while also leading the operations of my own organization. And so it just became a natural time for me to branch out after, I guess it was about 27 years in
Ah,
nonprofit.
yeah, that's amazing. I love that. It's like the next stage, right? The
Mhm.
next, ready for your next journey.
Yeah.
Well, great. So why don't you go ahead and let's turn the page, if you
Turn the
will,
page.
and get a little more specific about what you do and why you do what you do. And, for any of you that are watching, this is a great like template in how you can create your own storyboard and use Kim's as an example. So yeah, Kim, why don't you go ahead and share?
Yeah. Thanks, Gabby. Um, So this is a work in progress, and I actually attended a SCORE workshop that allowed me to build an elevator pitch, as you would say, but and this is the result of that. So what we do as an organization is we are a catalyst for nonprofits and small businesses to sustain for the long term. So for us and for me, an underpinning of what I do is that we create opportunities to sustain, or we partner in that journey of sustainability. And so we provide organizational and leadership development through leadership transition, through strategic and capacity improvement planning, and then through leadership coaching overall. And we work with small nonprofits and small businesses. And then as I researched, like, what does that really mean? And I looked at the clients that I serve, and I also did a little bit of a Google search, and I was like, oh, small business is pretty big when you think about it. And I do serve some what I would think is very large small businesses. So between anywhere between under 1 million to up to about 100 million in the budget or revenue size, and then up to about 500 to 750 staff people. And so I do serve in partnership in large nonprofits, and I come out of larger nonprofits. And I say that, and these are like some pushing about 60 million, somewhere in between that 50 and 60 million, which I think is large. But I also serve in some of the very small, like under 1 million nonprofits. And so I partner with truly what we would consider, I would say probably in our world, like that small to mid-sized nonprofit and small business. And why do I do that? As I've learned that approximately 30% and 65%. So 30% of the nonprofits and 65% of small businesses fail to exist after 10 years. And so it's really important for us to partner and sustain those organizations as much as we can, as long as there's still value in that. And in some cases, there may not be. But we know that organizations that really work on their strategies for sustainability can foster a more engaged workforce. So they have more engaged people coming alongside of them. They are addressing relevant business challenges, and I talk about relevancy in a couple places, and then drive better overall performance for sustainability and even growth for the long term. Where do we work? We can work worldwide, both virtually and in person. And so obviously we are based out of Phoenix, Arizona, and do a lot of work within what we would call the Valley here. But we are all over the country partnering with different size organizations.
Yeah,
Who
like
then
sign me up for an on-site leadership training in Italy, let me do it.
Yes, please sign me up for that. I would love that. That is true. Who benefits from this? I think any nonprofit, small businesses, anyone who's willing to build the strategy and really work through what that can look like for them to sustain. What we know is that 30% of companies that do build strategy or capacity improvement and are intentional with it, they grow 30% faster. And that highlights kind of that link between strategic planning and sustainable growth or sustainability. And what makes us different is I think that we are uniquely qualified by being educated or certified in every asset of our service offering. So as a consultancy, we don't offer anything that we are not certified or educated in. And I am happy to say that I have already built an amazing bench of other consultants who I call on or partner with, who are great in what they offer and in their expertise, and I won't wallow in that space or pretend to wallow in that space. I like the partnerships, and Gabby, I know that you know that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I think that's super powerful. You can't be good at everything.
no,
And, to try to be would be a disservice. So it's really important to build um team members,
yeah.
collaborators, people that can be a part of that conversation with you. So yeah, I love it.
I love that. So that's our first probably differentiator is that we know our strengths and we know what we can provide and an organization we know what we can't and where we need to pull on that bench to help us with that. And the other differentiator for us is really around implementation, that we don't just set a plan or give someone a strategic plan or something and then we expect that it would go on the shelf. We actually build in implementation and touch points so that it's intentional, that we are looking at being a partner with our organizations and that we will move them through this process consistently and in partnership. So I think those are our two big differentiators.
Love that. I love that. Well, and one of the things we were touching on a little bit in our conversation before was core values. And I know that's something that you're, developing along the way. Has this helped you kind of identify more of your who you are and why you want to do what you do?
Yeah, as I think about this is an exercise that I have done my personal values. And when I first thought that when I first put my business plan together, which was actually in 2017, I did all the values in that. But the world has changed and my lens on the world has changed. And so one thing that sits with me that is probably kind of goes in line with the differentiator and knowing our strengths is like really that business integrity or integrity. Moving in integrity is really important to me. I think partnership is really important and forming really good partnerships, both personally and professionally.
Yeah.
And I think in organizations and then I do think strategically. And so, being in a strategic mindset and thinking about things for the long term
Yeah.
and what's best. And so I think that those are my three kind of what drive. There's so many that I could, but I think business wise, these are the things that really that drive me to doing the good work, committing to people in that partnership, because as an executive of an organization and a nonprofit, now as an entrepreneur leading my own small business, it's lonely on top.
Yeah.
And we say that a lot. And so that partnership is really important to me. And I feel that I build the partnerships a lot different as an entrepreneur than I did, I think, as an executive of a nonprofit. Um, but at the same time,
Very similar.
that's a driving value for me is that. And then, obviously wallowing in the space of integrity, because I don't think that we are successful without doing that.
Right. Well, accountability to what you say you're going to do, right? And it's a struggle like when you're I would say as a solopreneur, let's say, because you have so many hats and so really prioritizing the most important things and doing and what you say you're going to do and having that all match up is that's work. That's
Yeah,
hard work right there.
it is hard work. It is hard work. Yeah.
Especially if you're pushing yourself, you know what I mean? If you're just like, okay, lackadaisical about things, then it's not a big deal. But it's hard work when you start to say that, you want $1 million business or you want certain things for your life. So you really have to put kind of the elbow grease and grit in to make that happen. Yeah.
Well, and Gabby, what you're reminding me of is what I'm on this journey of working on the business and in the business. And last year, starting out, I was just pants on fire and, working in the business. And it wasn't until the end of the year that I was tired. And then I realized like I had not invested in my own business and doing things that I do for other businesses, setting strategy and thinking about sustainability and growth. And what I knew was I couldn't sustain like this.
Yeah.
And I also knew that it was time for me to, you know, put my own beliefs and
Yes.
work into action for me. And so
Yeah.
now I'm balancing more working on the business and really being intentional in setting my strategy and the accountability to that. So that I can grow my business, but then working in the business and giving 100% to my clients and that. So it's been a great recognizing, reflection. It's been a great journey.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, in some circles they call that eating your own dog food. Like you're having to you got- you have to choke it down, right? And I think every business owner comes to that realization that there's only, so much you can do. So you do have to really value the collaborative relationships and trying to figure out and that's the strategy, figure out a better way. That is the challenge of the first, I would say, 3 to 5 years of every business owner. So, and even I am going back to the drawing board and going, okay, I've been doing this for 20 some odd years. What do I need to do to change this so it's different? And I realize after doing some strategic work, I'm in too many places. So, how do I need to think about this going forward? And now it's not just me saying it, it's my team going, Gabby, you're in too many places. We need to move you into other
Yeah.
places. So,
That's great noticing. But again, this is, similar to what we focus on is really that focus on sustainability and growth
yes.
or growth with sustainability. Because sometimes you can have those tentacles out in too many places. And it's like, let's pull that back to what
Yeah.
we do really well and make sure that we can follow through with that.
Yeah. Dan Martell, and I know you're a fan of him as much as I am. And one of the things that he says is that um, the things that you've struggled with the most in your life generally is something that you will end up being more passionate about and helping other people aspire to go through it. And I can say that's like completely true. Like, you have the struggling survivor entrepreneur trying to make it, you know what I mean? And in my business, and I think with your business, you're talking about sustainability, it's like you recognize that there's another hat that a small business owner needs in that financial role. And that financial role can really help take the lift off and help clients. So I think that's part of the passion behind Mod Ventures too, is that helping with taking the load off because there's a lot that they have to do, and being there and collaborating and supporting them through their next steps. So I love that that's your passion, and I think that that really goes back to you even thinking, how can I be sustainable?
Yes. But it makes me think about like one of the things that you had said to me before was that you want to be perceived by your clients as a partner, like somebody
Yeah,
internal to the organization as a
sure.
partner. And I think that that also is a value of mine, is that I want you to see me as a strategic partner, somebody who can help you grow and sustain. And you say that same thing. And I know that because I experienced that
Yeah.
I'm not only a friend, I'm a client, so it's like, I feel that. But it's really important, I think, especially in some of these businesses that, the financials are not my expertise. And so from day one, even in a panic state where I was texting around and say, who knows somebody who can do this? I mean, it was the very first thing that I put into place is like the
Yes.
financial support for the organization because that's not my wheelhouse. I
Yes.
know that. But you've truly been a partner. And so that's been really helpful to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think we share those values very dearly. So it's easy to be partners with people who have that same mindset. And that makes it easy when your customers align too with your values and what you're trying to accomplish. So I think that's, a blessing in, definitely a blessing in disguise. It definitely cures a lot of problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
I
know.
would agree. I would agree.
All right. So what do we have on this next slide? The next version. Me.
Next, we dive into the main services provided. So we can
Okay.
explain a little bit that, there are three main kind of buckets of work that we focus on. And one is in the leadership transition support and succession planning. And so we provide interim services for the CEO or the executive of the organization, and also like a director of operations or a COO or a director of programs or a chief program officer. All positions which I have held, but also that we're certified. I'm certified to be an interim and have the toolkit to follow through with that. And then I think succession planning, because this is a an integral part of the sustainability of an organization, is to think through what happens next,
Yeah.
and or what happens when there is a transition, and planning for that. So that's one bucket.
Mhm.
In organizational development, we really focus on that strategy planning or growth plans, capacity improvement plans, and then the change management. Sometimes they go together, and they always go together. But the services that we provide, sometimes somebody else is coming in with some of the strategy or process work, and we come in with the change management. And really, that's like getting the people behind what needs to happen for that. So that's in that bucket. And then we provide leadership and team coaching overall. So those are our three kind of main buckets of services that we provide
Mhm.
for our organizations.
Love it. Well, I've seen you in the position of interim CEO, and I think that's amazing that you can come alongside, I think it's difficult. Like that's probably one of the hardest positions to be an interim for because like you're supposed to like be casting vision and, kind of making sure all the people are, the whole leadership team is functioning well. So, wow, I mean
It's
that's a
it's one of my favorite things. I didn't
is it?
set out to be an interim or think that this would be um, part of my service offerings. But
Like,
as I got trained and I started doing it, I really love it, and I think I'm uniquely qualified for it. I would say, like lift the hood, dive in, do a quick assessment of an organization, know exactly the functional areas that need support, put put plans into place to provide that support, and I work hand in hand with the board in setting a success vision for the next leader, and then taking them through the hiring process. I don't typically do the search, but I partner
yeah,
with people who will do that search. But I do get in there, and it's usually about 6 or 8 months, and it's really just about lifting the hood and seeing what are those areas of the organization that need some immediate improvement that sets the next person up for success.
right,
That's the key, is that this is really to set the success vision, not a strategy, but a success vision for the next person so
right.
that they can be successful overall.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think, a big part of coming into, from a C-suite perspective, coming into an organization and going, okay, this is where you are. This is where you need to be. This is how we're going to get there. Um, that is a very specific skill set, and not everyone can do that, right? You walk in, some people are like so overwhelmed. I can't think straight, right? But if you've had the training and you have the experience, there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel, right? There's going to be good things that happen. You got to put in the work. You need to do an assessment, but I love that you do that. And succession planning.
Yeah,
That,
I'll say that the driving force to any of that work is really the relational piece. And I would say, if I went back to core values, building relationships is a really important value to me,
yeah,
and aligning strengths. And so I am never successful as an interim without the partnership of the team that's in place. And that goes from the board team to leadership teams to staff teams to community partners. I mean, I've not ever been successful without building those relationships, and really them bringing me along with them as they are implementing some of the changes in that. And so but building the relationship is probably one of my big core values. I like the people part of it. And
yeah,
I understand how hard it is to go through change,
yeah.
to think through change. And we do it in bite-sized pieces,
Mhm.
and say, like, what do we have direct control over right now, and what aligns to the strengths of the people, and then we just match all of that up.
Oh my gosh, that like is so important when you're talking about change management and dealing with potential overwhelm of because let's just be honest, everything's changing all the time. I believe we're headed into and or we already in the next technology revolution, like evolution, revolution, whatever you want to call it. It's AI is everywhere.
Yeah.
Change and figuring out how to manage that is really our next strategic, like, how to. So I think that there's so much changing right now in the workplace that, you know, having the tools to manage that and having support in how to tackle those things and really determining what is priority, what's the most important thing we can do next. You know, I meet with well, she's a counselor, but she's a therapist too. I mean, I guess that's what you call her. But and I'm going through tax season and we had a session and I was like, I can't think of what's next right now. And she's like, 30 minutes. Just figure out what to do in the next 30 minutes. And so everybody deals with overwhelm at
Yeah.
some point, everybody. And so it's not necessarily what you have to do in the next 30 days. It's what you're going to do in the next day. What will
Yep.
you do in the next week? It's really helping people move through change and adopt, like you said, sustainable practices so that they can evolve for whatever this next phase of the world's going to look like. So it's exciting and overwhelming at the same time.
It is. It is.
I mean, wow, we could have robots working in our home. That's crazy.
I think you're one of your prompts that I bring up AI and technology in a few slides for that
Okay.
reason. It is, yeah. I
Yeah.
think another thing that just came up for me as you were saying that is like it's a misnomer, I think, in nonprofit that nonprofit wouldn't keep up or can't keep up or can't
Yeah.
keep evolving and because they're nonprofit. And
Yeah.
I say this all the time, like there's no such thing as like nonprofit. Like everyone has to sustain. You have to build profit to sustain. And
Yes.
nonprofit organizations are businesses. And so I think that what is unique about it in some situations is that the mission really aligns to service delivery to people or causes that are different than they would be in different kinds of business or sectors or organizations. But what you're saying is the same. It's like we're still operating
Yes.
businesses, we're still running businesses, and in order to stay successful or sustainable, you have to stay up on some of this stuff and invest in it and to include your people, invest in the people to learn and grow and continue to move your mission forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely agree. Small business and nonprofits are the same. We use different words.
Yeah.
They don't have to, they're not taxed like, but at the same time, you have to provide value. You have to have some sort of profit. You have
A
to have
business
profit.
model, yeah, a profitable business model. Yes.
Exactly. So you
Yeah.
can sustain, pay your people,
Yeah.
and do the mission that you've been appointed for. Like
Right.
that, those are important things. And so they're exactly the same, but slightly different. So
Slightly different.
slightly different.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What's the
Okay.
next slide here?
Favorite part of what I do.
I love it.
Um, I I realized last year in reflecting and setting my strategy for this year that I had been in nonprofit for so long, for almost,
Yeah.
it is what raised me in my business world. And and I had said like I was in a movement for almost 25, 26 years. And then in my first year out on my own, I worked with almost 30 different organizations.
Wow.
And so I had to really step back and reflect like how humbling that is,
Yeah.
how great it is. And so it's been a wonderful experience and a complete pleasure to partner with so many different organizations with so many different missions.
Yeah.
And I've been excited to do that work.
Yeah.
And so that's one of my favorite things is that diversity in missions and the people who are doing the work within those missions. And that I love that. Um, I love having impact, making impact in partnership with organizations. And, we might have a small part of setting strategy or coaching someone through a challenging time, um, or leading through a transition. But I know that that impact can help sustain an organization and grow an organization. And so
Good.
these have been my favorite things to reflect on in this as I set strategy for this year, going into this year. It did my heart some well, did well for me to step back and say, what were the best parts of, last year
Yeah.
and what's my favorite thing. And so I think this partnership and driving mission and impact and mission and that it is quite the privilege when someone invites me into an organization to do work with them. And I
Yeah.
don't take that lightly. I take that very serious. But I also grew up, in small business and in nonprofit. And I know what it's like to be in those spaces and how difficult it can be and how rewarding it can be. And so that's been my favorite.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, I think we already know that by the time we get to the slide, but it's, great that you're able to reflect. I think that's so important. That's working on the business also. So take time to reflect on what you're loving about what you do. That's so important on that journey. It also keeps you motivated because you do recognize the impact and what you're doing to help people and keeps you going. I think those are the things that are so important. If you're not, writing down maybe your 3 wins on a daily basis, at
Yeah.
least on a weekly, like what are your wins for this week? How did you impact other people? Or, you know, if you're, trying to align with your values, mine would be, like AI and technology, and how did we, did our organization make any adjustments forward? Those are the types of
Okay.
things that, I'm trying to pay attention to in my business. But yeah, certainly, did I have any great conversations? Yes. So, those are the things that keep me fulfilled. And it's so funny. I don't have to have hundreds of them. If I had one during the week, I am so happy. So,
I would agree. I do think that like I have a practice of reflecting every night, like what are three kind of wins or things that I'm grateful for. And then at the end of the month, like what were the big successes? And when I say big successes, like this to me and putting together kind of storyboarding my journey has been a success because it's something that I've put off for a while, but it's
yep,
also something that is in my strategy for this year that I would learn to market
yep,
and learn to advocate for myself. And I've been in the mission and mission driven for so long in nonprofit that we didn't always toot our own horn. And I have to do some of that in order for me to get business. And
yes,
so I'm shifting a lens on that, but it's hard and it's
yeah,
vulnerable, you
yes,
know. And so I am learning to be good in that hard and vulnerable space. But I learned through the book, Buying Back Your Time, that I am a staller. And so sometimes when somebody asks me to do something, I'll be like, let me think about that. But
yeah,
really, what I'm doing is stalling on making that decision because something's making me uncomfortable or something. And so when this request came in from you that I would take part in something like this, I was like, oh, I'm honored. And I'm just going to say yes. And so it was one of the things that I was like, I'm just going to say yes, because in if had I not been aware that I am a staller at
yeah,
time, in particular in marketing myself and in
yeah,
talking about me and what I do in my journey, had
sure,
I not been aware that I might have still stalled and been like, maybe another month, Gabby, maybe
yeah,
another.
yeah,
But I jumped right in, and then so
yeah.
it's really important to reflect and be in that space to be vulnerable and push yourself in a different way.
And what I've noticed about that, because I mean, we're pretty similar in how we, I think, operate in some respects too. Like, I'll have months where I'm super confident. I'm like, yeah, I can do this. I'm putting myself out there and talking about the company and my journey and all this other stuff. And then I have other months I'm like, oh, but I messed up this and I messed up that. And, you kind of let some of your failures seep into all the good that you've done. You know what I mean? And so I think we have to really, going back to integrity, it's not going against integrity if you made a mistake and you have to kind of organize, right? But I'm so hard on myself. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't do this, and so I think small business and, talking about yourself and marketing is all about um having the right perspective and keeping the right mindset
Mhm.
about why you're here and being really kind and gracious to yourself when,
Yeah.
yeah.
And learning to let go.
Yeah.
There's so much to let go. There's so much good. And sometimes I know we've talked about this, like I get in my head and I
Yeah.
just swirl on the things that I should be doing, I could have been doing, I could have done better, all of that, rather than say, let go of that. We're
Yeah.
doing really good work and
Yes.
in partnership with really good organizations. And
Yeah.
so this is one of the goals for this year is to, I can reflect.
Sure.
I cannot swirl and I must let go.
Go. Yes. I love that. Yeah, I love that. Um, I'm gonna use that in promoting this because it's really good.
It's hard.
It
Well,
is
and I think
harder
what
than
is
it
there's
looks.
a new book. I think I have not read the book yet. Mel Robbins has the book about that, like letting go, and I have
Yeah.
not read it yet. But as I was saying this to somebody, someone said, "Have you read the book yet?" And I was like, "No," but I know that like this is something that I went into the year saying I'm going to practice letting go
Yeah.
and being okay,
Yeah.
in that learning space. But also like I'll probably read the book and pick up some really good tips from it.
Sure. Yeah, me too. I haven't read it yet because it came out right before tax season started, so I
Yeah.
haven't had a chance to get into that part. I'm reading all these other things, so but I will. I will soon. All right, what do we have next?
We have best advice I'd like to share.
This is perfect.
Yeah,
Tell
I
us.
this is one of your prompts to me, and I thought, oh, I don't know. But then I thought, like, I do know because I do this work, and that I think for organizations to stay in a mindset of proactive transition, sometimes people dread succession. And sometimes people dread transitions and they're inevitable.
Yeah.
And so why not be proactive in it as opposed to being reactive? Because it makes things a lot harder when you're reactive to it. And so I think that this is my intentional and proactive transitions create an agile and sustainable organization. And it is for all of us, to really be in that mindset of that proactive transition. Change is going to happen to us. We can either lead it or we can be responsive to it. And that's within our organizations and in partnership with the organizations. And so I think that was my first. And then be proactive with setting and tracking strategy annually. I know that we're in a season now where I think that as I think about strategic planning, I mean, we plan about 12 to 18 months and not much further out than that. And there are people who still want to plan this like 5-year plan. Our world is evolving so quickly that we have to evolve with it and stay relevant. And if we don't, then we lose out on business or maybe the opportunity to even sustain. And
Yeah.
so I say that an intentionally adapting organization is a sustainable organization. And intentionally adapting means that you're being strategic about what you want to focus on, that you're tracking and being accountable to that,
Yeah.
and that you're moving forward with it. It also means that there is some flexibility in, you're adjusting. It doesn't mean that you set a strategy and you never go back to it.
Yeah.
This is where agility and adaptability come in. You have to be able to say, we're on this path. things are changing this way. We're gonna change our trajectory to this. And so I would say at least, every other month or quarterly, you're revisiting this and saying, like, is this still the path that we're on for what's happening in the world or the ecosystems around us? And so I think it's really important for that. And then the last is to invest in strategic partners, whether it would be consultants or other contractors or other even thought partners, to provide an objective lens. And I say intentional strategic partnerships create sustainable organizations. And there are plenty of times that I'm talking to someone, you and I have conversations. I'm like, oh, I've never even thought about that.
Yeah.
And it's somebody who's got an objective lens who can lead me down a different path. And so I think that, some of that advice has been advice that's been given to me, is that, there are people who know things more than me and their strengths are different than mine. Um, Sometimes people who do similar things that I do, and I still need an objective perspective and to look at things from a different way.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's so important, to invest in your future growth, and whatever that looks like, you have to do it so that you can be exposed to new ideas. And I mean, if you're the CEO of your company and you're running things, you have to continually be like casting the vision of what that next version of us looks like. And I don't think you can do it if you're siloed in one place. You
Right.
need to be surrounded by other leaders and other people around you so that you can be exposed to these ideas. So I think it's so important. Yeah.
I think it comes up, you I know are part of um kind of the mastermind groups, and that where thought partners are coming together in similar leadership positions, and we also offer masterminds and predominantly for those emerging leaders, but also for some of the small business and nonprofit leaders to come together and really have that thought partnership with other people. And sharing in the challenges and then problem solving together from
Yeah.
different perspectives. And so I do think it's important. I like it. I like to be a part of.
Mhm.
Um, I like advisors or mentors. It's very important to surround yourself with people who have sometimes similar, sometimes different, but that can lead you down a different kind of thought process or path.
Yep.
Sometimes we just get stuck.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. Are we at the end or do you
I
have
think we are. I think we have
challenges?
two
Okay.
more
I love it.
challenges clients typically face.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of similar, a lack of succession planning, doing the intentional work to set up what continues when you're not there, to include leadership, diversifying funding or services and products. Relevancy is a very big kind of thought for me, and a place that I sit, that we see organizations or companies that have existed, but their relevancy is kind of waning, and they've not done the work to say, what do I need to do to become more relevant or to sustain that relevancy. I would say creating a strategic plan and casting long-term vision, goals, and objectives, and creating um, the accountability, but also these future aspirations. I think as organizations and companies, we see people start up and they say, but this has always been our mission. And I think that vision has to always change, because
Yes.
again, our ecosystems, our times, things around us are always changing. Our clients change, the needs of our clients. And if we're not willing to be strategic to think through that, then we lose out.
Mhm.
We become irrelevant. And then I think that the last was like thinking that you need to do everything yourself. I mean, even I came into this knowing that I needed partners, but then continued to do some of the things that I was like, oh, maybe it would be much better if somebody else was doing some of these things. And so I am transitioning into that now, where I am building capacity by inviting people in. And obviously paying for services and their strengths, but in thinking through, what do I need in order for me to build capacity to continue to grow and sustain? And so I think there's sometimes people go at this alone, and there's no need to do that.
Right, right. I love that. idea of helping people build capacity. I think that's probably one of the biggest areas that we can come in, and you and I both can come in and help leaders build capacity. Not only build capacity, but build some resiliencies, some resilient tools and help them think more clearly about the future. That is, two of the things that really can help business leaders reduce burnout,
Yeah.
um, and which would make them want to leave. So,
Yeah.
I've seen it happen in my business and other people's businesses, like people just get burnt out because they haven't built that capacity. They don't have the tools. And then you're dealing with succession planning much more quickly. One of the things that I noticed too, with organizations, and this has become a little bit more of a learning for me, and I know you were at our last big members meeting there in Arizona Growth, was the idea of succession planning, and not just necessarily when people leave, but also building leaders before, potentially they
Yeah.
leave. And so I think those are the thoughts that I have been more reactive to instead of preparing for. That's one of the areas I'm looking to really improve on, is not being so reactionary to that future plan. How do you do that? Build pipeline, I think. This is kind of my thoughts around building succession planning, but build a pipeline of potential staff who would be really great, build the leadership skills, build, next steps. So what does it look like for you? Like what is the vision for you in the company? There's, I think, a lot of different things that you can do, strategy around doing that, but I think it's become a lot more apparent to me as I've, I don't want to say suffered through, but yeah, a little bit suffered through some changes that I did not prepare for as well as I should have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And one thing that I think is going to lead us to another slide, but I was reflecting on as you were talking, was like thinking about not having to do everything yourself. Um, I What I love about working with you is one of the things that you've created as a value is really like being technology forward. And so I don't need to know how to use that technology, but I can tell you as a client of yours, when you've implemented this technology, it's made things easier for me. And so I do think that people have to think about, when it's not, you don't have to know everything that is, new, or that you have to seek those partnerships with
yeah,
people who are going to bring some of that to help you build capacity. And so I think that it was something that I was sitting with as you were talking
yeah,
before the succession part. But the other thing about succession too is that succession doesn't always happen from just the inside, and
yeah,
and that building a pipeline and some of these partnerships are, how do I partner with people on the outside who can provide some of these services, and that you don't sometimes we don't think about it because we haven't had to. But I think that, you've done this by, kind of marrying some of the technology, through this change that you went through, like marrying some of the technology with some of the systems work, with some of your people work to
yeah,
then build capacity.
right.
And it's noticeable. And as a client, you can feel it. And
Yeah,
so I think this is part of, having those strategic partnerships and not going alone. I don't
yes,
have to worry about what is all new in
yes,
financial systems and that, because
yeah.
we're doing that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. And you don't know, like, you really don't know the lift that's been taken off until you are without it, right? And you're like stressed and overwhelmed about it. And I think that is a real benefit that we do bring to the table, that you don't have to worry about the newest and truest, ways to do things. You just have an end result that you're expecting. So I think you're right. It's a real benefit for sure.
Yeah, I think my next slide goes into that, the new industry
Okay.
trends, and I talk about that AI and technology, and it can help
Yeah.
personalized services and experience for customers and clients, build automation and efficiencies within your systems. And then I talk about the same thing, building sustained collaborations. And so these are those long-term strategic partnerships and sharing resources with people. And that I think that this is something where as sustainability has become harder for organizations, and I think that we're in a season where we're going to see that it's even harder for some, in particular, some smaller organizations or organizations that are dependent upon various funding sources. I think that, I think in the long term, building some of these collaborations are something that helps to sustain the mission. It may not look exactly the way that you had hoped or that is in line with what the original vision is. But I do think that if your greater impact is top of mind, then I think people will benefit from really thinking through what does sustained collaborations look like. So these are kind of the two things that I've been in my circles, really working around, talking about a lot more, and truly through the lens of building capacity and sustainability.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love that you mentioned, I think a lot of nonprofits are experiencing some changes within, their funding, which can be quite serious, for their mission, for the people that are working for them, and things like that. I think it's a really important time where we have to start thinking about pivoting and figuring out how to fundraise differently. And it's so not funny, haha, but just funny, interesting that not only are business owners going to like the TikToks and the Instagrams and doing all of that type of fundraising. There are really big organizations that are raising money, and that's mostly how they raise money is through those social media avenues. And so, it'll be interesting to see how some of these organizations are able to pivot and get the word out and really do a great marketing, strategy in order to bring in some different ways of funding to make up for any of the funding changes that are going to be happening or potentially have happened. So, super important to have business-minded people like yourself, Kim, talking to them about, you know, pivoting, changing
Mhm.
their ways of doing things in order for them to be able to tackle what's coming next. And unfortunately, some companies, some nonprofits will be hit and surprised and like, oh my gosh, didn't expect that to happen. Um, but this is your next version of your story. And I think if everyone can start thinking about that, like what does it look like for you next year and how do you need to make changes in order for you to still be here?
Yeah,
Those in small business and nonprofit, all of us have to have those conversations on a regular in order
yeah,
to, you know, proactively move forward in their
yeah.
business. So,
I think, Gabby, that takes us to,
yeah.
like if you want to have that conversation with me for sustainability and building capacity,
Mhm.
there's my website. You can LinkedIn, Kim Madrigal, PhD. I didn't really think about putting anything more in the slide at this point,
Yeah,
but
no, it's
I'm
great.
sure as we post this and that, we'll expound on that a little bit and find avenues for people to be able to connect to me.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
So,
We'll put in all the details below so that you
yeah.
can find Kim. And I can personally vouch for Kim. She's amazing. Just love working with her. And I am sure that if you need somebody, she's going to be a great resource for you. So this comes to the end of our episode today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And if you're here to the complete total end with us right now, make sure that you like and subscribe because we are really putting out top-notch content and information and learning here on the Mod Ventures YouTube channel. And until next time, take care of yourself, and we'll see you then. Bye.